welcome to the podcast, Lindsey. I know you as Williams back in the camper day, but now Perry.
Yes.
Welcome to the podcast. Can we get a little cheer for Lindsey?
Thank you.
Oh, there we go.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah. Glad to have you on the podcast. I want to tell everybody a little bit about who you are. I mean, you were the Lake Charles bus 2-week squad.
Never missed a year.
Never
Right.
missed a year. Started in the third grade.
Third grade. I was actually when the cabins were in the pavilion. My first year, I was a roan.
Come on.
It was like 1991 or 1992 in the pavilion cabins, which they, stopped doing at some
Sure.
point. So yeah, a long time ago.
And now your roans have moved on to the hill.
I heard.
So
That's
there you
exciting.
go. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, so I grew up coming to Brookhill every year as a camper from the time I was in third grade. I am from Lake Charles, Louisiana, and we did bring 2 Greyhound buses for years. Every summer, our parents would load us up, and we would come down here and park in the middle, and we would all unload. And it was a highlight of our summer to get to do that. And so I was a 2-weeker from the 4th grade on, and thrilled that it's back.
Yes.
And now we're dropping our kids off at it. So yeah, so I worked as a senior counselor. I think I have a unique story. I might have been the first that did not come and apply to be a senior counselor when I was supposed to. So I took a year off.
Oh.
And when I applied, what should have been my second senior counselor summer, it was my first. And y'all were not sure y'all were doing that at the time.
Okay.
And so I got hired the last one hired. I might have been a fill-in, I don't know. But so I feel like it was really unique. I really believe that's a decision my parents made from the time I was 9 years old, started the course of the trajectory of what became my future in a way. Yeah. And then choosing not to work one summer and then knowing that God called me to it and literally begging y'all, I really feel called to be here. I'm supposed to be here. I'd love for you to give me a chance. Y'all did hire me. Worked 3 summers. I was a Bay senior counselor and then ended up meeting my husband, Brooks Perry, here.
The Brooks Perry, which we've had on the podcast. Yeah. So that's incredible.
Yeah.
What a story. All right. Now, before we kind of get into y'all's life and what you do, and you've got some great adventures anyway, I cannot wait to get into all that. We want to play a game with you.
Okay.
Which you know the game because you're a big avid podcaster of Brookhill. And it's Brookhill Podcast, Brookhill Game. And so you know the drill. You have 30 seconds.
Okay.
All right. I think Brooks is now like 3rd or 4th. So.
I know, man. I want to beat him.
Yes. No, that would be the highlight of my life.
Amazing.
Yes, I would love that. Okay. So you have 30 seconds to name, and your 3 categories are songs, activities, and cabin names. So you got plenty of genre to get there, and your time begins now.
Okay, Palominos, Thoroughbreds, Arabians, Galicinos, Bays, Percherons, Fillies, Chestnuts, Pintos, Lipizans, Roans, Walkers, Hackneys, Morgans, Buckskins, Appaloosas, Mavericks, Okay, drama, horseback, cheerleading, gymnastics, riflery, archery, hodgepodge, fun swim, big lake, small lake, nature, I said horseback already, crafts and drama and news. I think I repeated it.
I think, did you count those?
No, that was a lot.
I unofficially have that at 29.
Wow.
That we will officially check that out and put the score up at the end.
You're going down, Brooks Perry.
That would put you tied for first.
Yes.
No one has done a name a second. That was pretty.
Sweet.
I went through. I was doing the finger counting, and I think yes.
Man.
Okay.
It's that visual memory.
That's
I was trying
right.
to see the signs.
Yes. That was impressive. Yeah. Okay, so Lindsey, you were here. You know, what did camp mean to you as a camper? Can you remember any camp stories or, you know, my visual of you is as that 2-week camper at Olympics. I remember, I think you did boating. Is that right?
Boating and the ping pong and the swimming or something.
Okay.
I do remember that.
That is my visual remembering you as a camper. And you were, obviously we were a little bit smaller back then, but you really stood out just because you were always there. You were very vocal. You were into camp. And so what did camp mean to you as a camper? Can you remember any moments particularly, or was it just kind of the overall thing for you?
Yeah. I mean, overall, it was this thing you looked forward to, and it was a place where you could go home, where you knew you were loved, you knew people knew you. And see, back then we would write letters. We didn't have all this technology stuff. I still have in my attic the buckets of letters that Stacy Perkins would write me back and forth.
This was a camper or a counselor?
A counselor,
Oh,
a
wow.
senior counselor. Crosby. I mean, we would write Heidi. I remember being in Heidi's cabin. She was a graduate and then slowly became, my counselors. And then I got to work with her. And to me, camp was always getting to come back home to these people that had continuously invested in my life away from here. That really is what helped me grab that vision of, man, I want to be able to do that to someone too. So you always felt known. That was like a comfort in a way. Obviously, the relationships, I came with Lake Charles people, but there were so many Lake Charles people that I would actually bunk with Tally.
Wow.
I wanted to be with someone and other people that I wasn't with in my regular circle of influence because we were at camp and I wanted to do camp life. And then Tally and I mean, she was in our wedding, sang. And so just those relationships that came as a result of it, that's how I see camp, is being seen, known, and having those relationships with people. And obviously it was, fun and Olympics, and I'm a 3-time Olympic winner is the base.
Okay.
So, I let her know that last night. I think I always like to have fun. And Brookhill is a place where, you're teaching kids Christianity's fun.
Come on.
And so I always wanted to kind of do that, and you get to emulate that in a way nonstop.
Yeah. And then you moved on to being a JC.
Mm-hmm.
Do you feel like you learned a lot serving and being a JC?
Yes.
I know especially back then it was probably a little more difficult even than it is today.
Yes. Yeah. I think it was a little different culture back then. Things changed when when our little group became senior counselors. We adjusted some things in that capacity because we really saw the opportunity to invest into high schoolers that, back at home, maybe you don't have opportunities where someone's mentoring you. And so as a JC, I just remember always wanting to come and serve. I think that if you were to ask me, what did I learn from Brookhill? It was how to serve. My eyes were open to that. Life was no longer about me and what I wanted, which that's kind of how I grew up. I just thought the world revolved around me. Mm-hmm. And then to be able to experience that as a JC, to say, I'm going to submit to this authority. And it was life-changing. You don't even recognize sometimes the things you're doing that's affecting and changing other people's lives, but it's that internal change of, man, this is different when you're working for the Lord, you're living for the Lord, you're being pushed by the Spirit to press in and really serve genuinely and wholeheartedly.
Wow. And then so you did that, you learned all that, you go on to be a senior counselor, which was of the Bays.
Yes.
And what was that experience like? You got any fun, counselor stories?
Well, I remember my first year, because I was the new one. I was the newbie, me and one other girl that came from Applied Life. And I remember that whole summer just being in awe, like, man, these people know what they're doing. And I got to up my game a little bit here. And I remember being intimidated by that at first, and then just having to make this commitment to myself that it's going to be about the girls in my cabin, the kids in my activities, and I'm just going to see them. I'm not going to worry. I'm not there yet where everybody else was at that time. And I'm just going to invest here where I know. And that was another thing that was life-changing for me, because I liked the spotlight. I liked the attention. But when you're put in a position where you're not the number one, you're not the greatest, you're not the one that everybody knows, you have to build on something.
Wow.
And so I remember that. I remember the fun that we would have, just on the hill. With every year that I worked, it was always a different group of people.
Yep.
And so just building those relationships with each one of them and making the memories, and I don't know, it was fun.
It's so good. It's amazing how God obviously knows us. He knows what we need.
Absolutely.
And that must have worked, a lot into you. Obviously, you have 2 older brothers, and so you're the only girl, and I'm sure, you're the star of the show at home and that kind of stuff. You didn't have to compete, but but God knew what you needed.
Yeah.
And especially, I liked what you said. You were so focused on your girls, so focused, on your activities and stuff, that you weren't comparing yourself to other people. And that is so easy to do. What a distraction.
Absolutely.
To compare yourself to other people.
And a killer. I mean, really, like, it will consume you. I mean, I'm watching Maylee Glass and Tally Johnson, and Jenna Cox, like,
Yes.
I mean, I'm watching these girls mesmerized. I mean, your sister and Kara and Leah, and I mean, like, that whole group that have been here for years.
Wow.
I mean, like, I'm not them. I'm not them. And, it's something that Steven Sexton always would talk about is, who are you going to be? And he goes, Lindsey, I did not hire you to be the caboose. This is not what it's going to be.
That's good.
And so really having to see, what gifts do I have? What can I do? And I think this is what my biggest takeaway as senior counselor was learning how to pray. And I mean, everything revolved around being a prayer warrior, because I couldn't rely on my own self anymore.
Right.
I mean, that wound was ripped open and, exposed majorly, that this was not on my doing, and I wasn't going to survive in doing that.
Yep.
And so just really learning how to pray through that. And then to go 3 more years, being head of the hill with Tally that summer, and just realizing that kind of how the Lord had walked me through full circle, to then realize I had a heart for these girls that were coming in new, to say, you have something to give, and God has you here for a reason. And don't try to be like them. Don't try to compare. Don't try to, I mean, it will literally steal your joy. It'll steal everything from you. It'll be all consuming. And so there's a freedom that comes with knowing who you are and walking in that.
Well, it's so cool to come full circle, right?
Absolutely.
To go from, you were the one, God's teaching that in you, and then when you go to speak it, it's not just something you heard.
No, lived it.
It's something
Learned
you
it.
lived.
Yes.
I mean,
Yeah.
That's the Great Commission, to be discipled in order to make disciples.
Yeah.
And that's so cool. And I love that Brookhill has that in our process built in.
Absolutely. Oh, and then to learn how to get rid of insecurities, or to live unoffendable.
Oof.
I think that was that might have been my number one.
Okay.
Everything offended me. Everything bothered me. It was, you didn't look at me the right way. You didn't talk to me. You didn't sit by me. That kind of thing. It was a major eye opener. Again, when you're center of attention, want everything about you, you're going to be offended when someone does or doesn't do this, or when you're not selected. I mean, I had to wait my turn for a lot of things over the years. And so to learn how to say, okay, it's not my time. That's not me. I can't do that. There's no way I could do that. But I can do this. And just being consistent.
It's so good. God, the character that was built.
Changed my life.
Yes.
It changed my life. It really did.
I mean, you start adding
really
just
did.
those 2, 3, 4 things, and you look back at, you're a completely different person.
Different. And again, that's how I started this podcast, by saying Brookhill literally changed the trajectory of my life. Now, I had the foundation, my parents gave us all of that, but to be 16, 17, 19, 20, 21 years old and be instilling in these things, that I'm grateful I walked into my adult life kind of having that established.
So good.
And then that then goes into work life. I was a teacher in elementary education major and taught for several years, and then in our marriage, and for the last 16 years, the way our life's been, I've needed all of those things to survive.
But kids have been everything for you. So
Yes.
you go from working with kids at camp to then being a teacher, to then you and Brooks having your own bunkhouse.
Yes.
You've got 3.
I have 3 kids,
Okay.
Gavin, Miles, and Brooklyn. Our oldest is going to be in high school, which is,
Oh, you're old.
man, I feel it. I'm going to be 40 this year.
Oh my gosh.
I know. And then we have 2 little ones. Well, I say little, Miles and Brooklyn. They're 11 and 10. And they're a lot of fun, going into middle school, intermediate school, whatever it is. So It's good. Yeah.
So you and Brooks get married, and Brooks and I didn't talk about this, but I wanted to talk about it with you. Was you get married and then you move overseas.
Yes.
And not only do you move overseas, you move to Saudi Arabia,
The kingdom.
And what year is this?
2010.
This is 2010. So this is post 9/11. This is all that kind of stuff. And, how did this conversation come about? Does he walk home and say, "Hey, just wanted you to know I'm thinking about us moving"? Like, how does that, tell me about that.
It started with him saying, "Hey, there's this meeting that I'd really like for you to go and attend." And it's just going to explain to you the different projects that our company is offering. But listen, don't worry. I've only been with the company about 3 years, and there's no way they'll hire me, but it'd be something that maybe later down the road, I'd really love for us to pray about and consider. So I went to this meeting, and all of a sudden they put these pictures up on this screen, and it's talking about the kingdom of Saudi Arabia. And I'm like, and he's not there. Like, he's not in there with me. It was myself and some other women. Or maybe you were. I can't remember. I just remember being surrounded by several women. And the more and the more conversations that kept going, I'm this naive 24-year-old. Like, okay. And also thinking, great, but Saudi Arabia? Like, you've got to be kidding me. Like, we just moved 2 hours from my hometown, and I thought that was a stretch.
Oh, that was life-changing for you. That was traumatic.
Life-changing, right.
Yeah.
But it was like, okay, we're starting our life, and da-da-da. And then fast forward a few months, he comes back in and says, "Hey, I think I'm going to apply." And again, still naive, but I was holding on to this idea he'll never get hired.
Right.
They would never choose someone with less than 10 years experience.
He's a great salesman. I like how he soft landed that right there. That was a good slow dance. He slowly
did it. Absolutely. And then came the big one. We were sitting at a Cracker Barrel, and I was actually I remember crying the whole entire meal of him saying, "Babe, I really feel like this is what we're supposed to do." And that was when I was in that season of, okay, I'll submit, but then also really didn't know what I was doing. And so this is how I explain our experience with Saudi Arabia. We ended up moving 2 years later. It took that long to get us over there. We had a child at that point because it took so long to move us. And I got on the plane 6 months pregnant with our second son.
Wow.
And I went kicking and screaming. This was not what I signed up for when we got married. He never said this is stuff he wanted to do. Never in a million years knew this was even an option. And then I left Saudi Arabia 3 years later with 2 more kids. They were born in the kingdom, kicking and screaming because it was an amazing experience. And life-changing.
Wow.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And so I think that, there's so much that could, pack that in with the message. But here's what brought me freedom is, in the Bible, there's a story about how Jesus went before the people. And so he said, when you enter the promised land, I have already been there. And I'll never forget, it was December 17th of 2009, before we moved. I was a basket case living up to this move. And when I heard those words, instantly, it was like, okay, the Lord's already gone before us. And there's so many parts of our move and our life there that obviously were a blessing, something that we'll never get back again, that I appreciate. But one of the things is our daughter had a medical condition that the U.S. missed twice. But our Saudi doctor found it because of the way they do their medical. And so it was kind of one of those things that just rested in our heart that we never would have known her kidney was damaged had we not been in that country with that doctor. And I was the first for our company to have a child there. The first one.
Wow.
Yeah, we wrote the program for him. We started it all. And then in the end of 2020, there was 19 American children with Chevron Phillips that had been born in the kingdom. And I say we started it. We were the guinea pigs, but it was like, okay, the Lord's already been there. We're going to do it. It'll be great.
How many people, though, because we can't see it, right? It's just glaring how difficult it's going to be, but we don't see the victories. How many people, they just refuse.
And you miss out.
And you miss out.
You miss out.
on what God, I mean, gosh, let's just go Brooklyn alone.
Yes.
Let's just go, it was to save her life or to heal her. I don't know the magnitude of that. Let's just go, God's like, I'm setting something up. Just trust me.
Yeah. That was 3 years later. That came 3 years at the end of our journey there. That I'm grateful for it. I'm grateful that I feel like the Lord taught me to be obedient, that he's called us to this. He's faithful in what he's doing. And I mean, it was hard. Don't get me wrong. It was hard to do.
Absolutely.
But again, there's so many stories that came out of it that we can see the Lord's hand through the whole entire thing, that now as a result,
Right.
we move every 4 years. Or we have moved every 4 years. And so people are like, I don't know how you do it. I can't believe how you do it. How do you move your kids? What? And I'm like, look, we're going to watch the Lord be faithful in our suffering. I mean,
That's
there's
right.
suffering in it.
That's right.
But we're going to watch the Lord be faithful. And to be able to walk our kids through that at this age, they're getting real life experiences of the tangible hand of the Lord over our family and for them.
God, that is so good.
Yeah.
I mean, that's just so good. But to go and move to a different culture.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I was covered up from the neck down.
So you had to observe the customs.
I had to observe it. I never had to cover my hair because I wasn't Muslim.
Okay.
But we did have to cover our bodies from the neck down. So anytime we went off of our compound, we had drivers. The company, women aren't allowed to drive in the country up until
you had to observe that.
You had to observe everything.
Okay.
You had to observe their prayer times. They shut down everything 5 times a day.
Okay.
I mean, you were in their country.
Right.
There is no, well, let me teach you how we do it
Right.
in America. No, they don't care.
Which is understandable. It's their
Absolutely,
country.
it's their country.
Right.
And I mean, we lived on a compound with secure guards that, had the guns, and they would check for bombs under our vehicle every single time we went through, which for some people that would produce fear, but for us, it was comfort. Hey, they're looking out for us, and this is going to be, this is for our safety.
Right.
So I would cover up, and, my children had blonde hair. So for Muslims, they're considered to be lucky. And so we had a lot more attention than what maybe other people would do. So I had to learn words, how to speak in their language to let them know what my boundary was, and Mama Bear's coming out. I'll never forget, we were at a restaurant. So they have family entrances where the men can be with you, and then they have single men entrances. So all restaurants, everything was separate over there. And so no man could acknowledge me without the presence of my husband. So we learned their culture. We learned how they do things just to make it, enjoyable for us and comfortable in a way. And so, so we did those things, observed the way they lived life. And I mean, it was fun. I don't know. We had a good time. We enjoyed it over there. It was great.
That's incredible. I mean, just the stories, and I remember asking y'all stories and stuff when y'all came back. I was fascinated by it. I think we're fascinated by people who do things that others are unwilling to do. And that's what and I can only imagine what that did for you and Brooks. And I know it has the potential to tear y'all apart.
Sure.
But because y'all are who you are and you love the Lord and, you've learned we work things out, I think it had to have bonded y'all. You're talking about leave and cleave.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It was us. It was us. No, I mean, it was life-changing for our marriage just to be in that capacity alone. And now we had families that were there, and I mean, they became our people. I mean, we lived in a fishbowl, essentially.
Still close with some of those families?
Oh, absolutely.
Come on.
Absolutely. I mean, some of them were in the delivery room when I had my children so that they could see what it was like how to have a baby over there.
Wow.
But yeah, I mean, life friendships, the way we had at camp, we kind of had there. The biggest part for us in Saudi Arabia was we started kind of an underground church. We knew going there that we needed to have church.
Okay.
That was a big part of our life. And so it was our church at the time in League City really partnered with us and helped us. They provided material for us, and we started it. We had to be real secretive. We would have weekly meetings.
Okay.
Everybody would bring iPads, no Bibles. And then we would serve lunch so that if anyone questioned us, hey, we were just a group of people having lunch. But what started out as maybe 10 to 12 in the beginning, we ended with about 66 people in a 3-year time frame that we provided church for them. Our Sundays there are Fridays. And so every Friday we would rotate people's homes and I mean, have a service. And then it got so big that we ended up having to have kids services and nursery with all the families that were young. And I mean, I do believe it filled a need for people. And it's, Mim Hetty always talks about, create your Brookhill wherever you are.
That's it.
For us, we had to create, there's no church there in Saudi Arabia for us to go to, Protestant church for us to go and worship. And so, and it was really cool because then we were able to develop people within our company, which then you think about the influence that you're getting to make, not just in their families, because it'll mess with your head to move overseas, leaving your life, leaving what you know, leaving who you know, leaving your comfort, starting over essentially. That was a big thing for a lot of people. And so to be able to establish that community right off the bat, I mean, Brooks and I we were really hardcore about it. We have to do this. It was a great thing. And we had a family saved that, that lived in the U.S., from Houston. And the woman always said it took moving to Saudi Arabia to find Jesus.
Come on.
So, I have chills thinking about it, And then that changed the trajectory of her girls and their families, their life and all. And so we knew there was a purpose for it. And again, you go back to that aspect of missing out. If I would have let fear dictate, I would have fought him and fought him and fought him, and we never would have gone. But then because I was willing to submit to that and say, even in my fear, which, the Bible's clear, it says fear nothing.
Right.
And so to be able to walk through that, then yes, going back to your original question, that strengthened our marriage because we learned early on, this is who we have. It's us. There's no parents here. There's no siblings. There's nothing here for the two of us. And it was a really sweet time in our marriage with our kids being young that we always say, man, we wish we could get back. I don't think we had experienced a lot of life yet at that point, but we got to travel. We got to do all these things that kind of made you appreciate having that opportunity. Absolutely.
And bonded your family together. But there's just so much there with what you're talking about because, so many people... and I'm not judging them. I'm not whatever. It's a fact. They quit. They give up. They fight. And if they'll just push through, and I love the word grit, and to have that grit. And Brooks and I were talking about soft skills when he was on here, and grit's a part of it.
Yeah.
And we missed those lessons because of the facts that, okay, well, I don't want to wear what their customs have, or, you couldn't just get in a car and drive. I'm not going to drive myself.
I don't want to be inconvenienced.
And let's not minimize. It's hugely inconvenient.
For sure.
I mean, here in the States, we hop in the car and do whatever.
You have access to everything.
Yes.
You have access to everything.
And that was removed. Go from America to removing everything. I mean, that's massive.
Oh, yeah. I mean, even just to go to the grocery store, you don't have the exponential amount of things and variety.
Really?
You don't have that over there. You would have to, here in the States, I make my menu, make my grocery list, and I go to the store and I buy it. Okay. Well, there I would make my list while shopping in the grocery store based on what I could find that they had access to. Now we lived in a great area,
sure,
but it's based on just whatever they have access that comes into the country. And so, there was a beef recall one point, and so, we had no ground beef for a while, and you learn to try camel and do the little things like that, but it's there was a level of inconvenience that you had to adjust to. thinking of camp and the things that we learn, you're going to either adapt to a situation or you're going to adjust the situation. And I feel like I took what I learned at Brookhill with that message, and in Saudi, okay, man, I can cry and I can be upset that I don't have Velveeta this week, or all right, we're going to do something else. And so I think that helped too with my personality. I'm a type A. It's got to be this way and make it happen. And you just learn to, instead of living tight-fisted, it has to go this way. You just eventually start living with your palms open, saying, all right, and you go with the flow and you make it happen. Because the flip side of that is then you're miserable. I mean, I could have been miserable that whole entire time that we lived there. I mean, I really could. It's a choice, that you make. But then to say, hey, I'm going to embrace this and have fun, and it is what it is, and I mean, lots of life lessons in that.
Oh my gosh, and it sounds like you get stripped down of the things that don't matter, that we think matter so much, but what matters is you, Brooks, your kids, the people around you. And to focus on those things, and who knows, there may have been people that didn't have your attitude, and it may have ruined their time.
Yeah, they went home.
It
did. I mean, it did happen, and you saw that, which was then even more motivation to make sure. I think about staff trainings that we used to have, and y'all would talk about be a success. Make your activity success. Make your cabin a success. So you know what? Our time there, it was a success, and we're grateful for that, because now we're 10 years past that, and sometimes we're like, do we want to go back? Would we do it again? Like, where we would willingly put ourselves back in that position to live that lifestyle again. It was just slow and something that we don't have anymore.
Sure.
Oh,
that's just unbelievable. I love that. I love the church. I love everything. That's just such a unique experience. 3 years.
3 years.
3 years. And then you guys come back, and I think you moved to Houston.
We did the Panhandle.
Okay.
We went from one sandbox to another sandbox, essentially. So instead of 8,000 miles away, we were just 800 miles away from home.
Okay.
So we did the Panhandle for 4 years, went back to Houston, which is kind of where we started, did that for 4 years. And then last summer we moved back to the Panhandle, and we were in Amarillo.
Okay.
Texas.
And when you were in Houston, I think the flood hit. Is that right? Well, yeah.
Oh, the day before. We bought our house on Thursday afternoon, and Hurricane Harvey hit Saturday morning.
No way.
Brooks's plant had an obscene amount of water in it and was shut down for the first 6 to 9 months. It was a season of life. That was harder than Saudi Arabia.
Come on.
Yeah. I mean, you talk about starting over, and our house was in all of our house contents were in a truck in some warehouse that they couldn't get to for weeks. And by the time it got to us, the front of it had flooded where it had been in the warehouse or out of the warehouse. And, and then again, you start to think about what really matters.
Stuff.
I mean, it's
just stuff.
It's just stuff. And we watched people, we helped people gut their homes, so it was, so we went through Hurricane Harvey, we went through the pandemic, and then we went through a freeze all in our 4 years of Houston life.
Wow.
Yeah. So I think that aged us quite a bit. Talk about life experiences.
That's true. But you never know what God's preparing you for.
Right,
I mean, when you can do Saudi, let's be honest, you can do anything.
You can do hard things.
I mean, you can.
You can do hard things. Yeah. And I feel like that's a message I'm teaching my kids is, we always tell them, get comfortable being uncomfortable.
God, it's so good. Heidi talked about that when she did that was literally her sermon title.
Oh my gosh. My son's old, right? I tell you all that all the time. Like, the only way you are going to make it, again, trying to be a success, you have to get comfortable being uncomfortable.
God, so good.
And that's for a whole season.
Yes.
We're just now coming up on, next month will be 1 year, and there's still so many uncomfortable moments from learning your way around something new. See, I think people struggle with dealing with something that's new. It's the fear of the unknown and the idea of how this is going to inconvenience me, what this will put me through, starting over, all this. Hey, at this point, I'm like, let's do it. It's not a game, but it's definitely like, we are going to make this work and it's going to be good, because otherwise you miss out, you lose opportunities. And we don't want to be people that are so focused on ourselves that we miss out on these new opportunities and new people that are around us that we have the ability to connect with or love on, or that we have something to offer them or they have something to offer us. There's opportunities everywhere.
Mm-hmm. God, that's so good. I love that. And Maylee even talked about, she did a staff meeting and she talked about how she even prays for suffering for her kids.
Wow. Yeah.
And she said, not too much suffering.
Yeah.
She said, but suffering is good for us. And it works to the top, those immaturities, that flesh, that stuff that just doesn't matter, that really you're not going to naturally work it out of yourself. You're not going to wake up and go, you know what, I'm ready to stop being selfish. I'm I'm ready to stop being petty.
Yeah. Well, it's hard work. I mean, and a lot of people I don't think want to do the work that it takes to change that. I mean, we, been walking through with our oldest through something, just life things that are going on at this 13, 14-year-old age. And to be able to say, hey, this doesn't have to be your future based on the choices, but it's going to be hard.
Come on.
It's going to be hard to be the only one,
okay.
And that's kind of our family motto is we're the Perrys and we do it different.
Yeah.
Even if you're the only one. And that's okay. But I need my kids, especially with the lifestyle that we live, moving. I need them to not be wanting to succumb to just being a follower because they're the new person, kind of like where I was, in 2002. That who am I? What has God called me to? What do I have to offer? And how can that, benefit my life, benefit the lives of others, and then that the Lord's always working. I mean, and I just think that people don't want to do the hard work because, man, the turmoil they have to go through to get to that place. If you could just focus on that victory that can come at some point.
If we can just get to the place where we are so eternally minded that we realize God is doing something
all
here.
Mm-hmm.
If we can get to that place where we go, you know what? I don't know what this is, but I know that God is doing something. And it's not till you get a little bit of life experience that you can look back. I love using the example of you're climbing up a hill. I can't see where I'm going, but if I climb enough, when I look back, I see,
that was there for a reason.
That yes. And the only time you can see where you're going is when you're going downhill, and that's never a good thing. But if we can just live with the mindset of God is doing something here, and you can look back now, and you can see, hey, I was used to being star of the show. A little bit like a Joseph thing, where Joseph was star of the fam.
Yeah.
And then you all of a sudden go to where you're nobody as a first-year senior counselor, but you learn through. And you can just see each moment where God was building the two of you.
Right. Yeah. Well, and even when people ask me why are you so willing to move every time an opportunity comes up for Brooks. I think to myself, we've watched the Lord be faithful through every single move, even the ones that we knew we were supposed to say yes to, but we couldn't figure out, man, what is this? What's going on? But 6-9 months later down the road, all of a sudden there's a promotion that you never should have been there, never would have been on the table had we not taken that, opportunity. But, and I think it's living in the mindset of, being led by the Spirit. I mean, we don't, we say no plenty of times to these moves because, hey, the Lord's not calling us there yet. But then when we do say yes, it's because the Lord said, hey, I want you there and I want you to do it. And we want to be people that live according to God's will for our life. We don't want to be outside of that at all. I think there's more turmoil in that when you're living outside of God's will for what He wants.
I love that. Being led by the Spirit. I grew up in the church, and you'd hear that term all the time. And a lot of times I think I saw that as an emotion or something like in church. No, being led by the Spirit is when you are out in a place that I don't understand this. it's not an emotion.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a trust, it's a commitment, but I always thought, we got to be led by the Spirit. It's like a worship term, right?
Yeah.
But no, this is a life term.
Right. Absolutely.
This is out in the middle of a dry area.
And for us, it's seeking peace. Psalm 34:14, it's my anthem right now. It says, seek peace and pursue it.
Come on.
Well, there's two parts to that. You have to willingly look for it, and then you have to willingly work for it. So you're not just looking for it. And I love the definition that I heard about peace. It's not the absence of chaos, but it's the presence of Christ.
Oh, that's so good.
And so there can be chaos all around you and what you're going through. Our moves are chaos, our kids' situations and medical conditions and all these things that are going on. There's chaos in all of that. But if you seek out peace in the presence of Christ there, being led by the Spirit, you can do anything.
Yeah.
You can do it when it's hard. You can do it when you don't want to. And I don't know, that's something that we've really tried pursuing because of the way our lifestyle is. It'd be really hard to keep our feet on the ground with so much change that goes on constantly.
That's a great point. And you mentioned some medical, conditions. I know we touched on Brooklyn's deal, but y'all had more than that.
We do, yeah. So our oldest was diagnosed about a year and a half ago with an esophagus disorder that from the time he was 6 years old, he had been choking. And we literally, this is terrible. We used to discipline him for it. We were like, chew your food. And then it wasn't until I realized I was cutting my 12-year-old's food up like a toddler. It was like the Holy Spirit just said,
you're like, hey,
this isn't right. This isn't right. And within a week's time, testing, diagnosis, and was in the procedure room where his esophagus was 80% obstructed, and we had no idea. And again, we have been from, this area doctor, all these places from moving that sometimes I think had we been in one place,
they would have said something.
Somebody would have noticed something at some point. But again, what do you do? But the fact that this doctor, I just said, listen, you're going to think I'm crazy, but my 12-year-old is choking on his food. And she said, nope, I know. I guarantee you it's going to be this, or this. And again, within a week. And so, it's just amazing. And that we lived in Houston at one of the top medical facilities.
Where'd y'all go?
We're at Texas Children's.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
You can't go wrong, with there. And so again, that was the Lord. He brought us there. COVID happened. I never would have seen the frequencies of his choking in such a time had we not been in that pandemic and home.
Because y'all were just together.
We were together. We were just together 3 meals a day that I was cooking, prepping for. And so again, then to have a 12-year-old to say, buddy, you didn't ask for this. There's a lot worse conditions and medical issues that you could have.
So which y'all have seen in your own family.
We've watched Brandon. Yep. Walk through leukemia.
Yep.
And so, you're talking about a miracle, right? Victory there. And so, to say, this is what you're going to carry. You can have a testimony out of this. And whether you're healed now on this side of heaven, or if you're never healed, this is what we're going to walk through. And it does not get easy. We handed him over to the doctors last week in Houston to do his third procedure where, they're checking for these cells that are present. And again, the first time they did a procedure, they found an infection that 100% of the time turns to cancer. And we never would have known had he not been diagnosed with this esophagus disorder. So again, okay, yes, this is not what we want to carry. This is not what we want to deal with, but thank you, Jesus, that your hand is on this. Right. And, he can go into high school now comforted that his esophagus is widened, that medicine is working, that they went in to stretch him and do a balloon thing, and it was so bad that they couldn't. They would have torn the lining of his esophagus, which you think you're sending them in to get healed, and then they come back and say, listen, y'all are in bad shape. We got to wait this out. To now, a year and a half later, going last week and then, getting the results that it's opened more than 50%.
Come
so
on.
it's amazing. I mean, it's just amazing to watch the Lord's hand and again, to be willing to accept these things that we don't want to carry, but then to teach our child how to experience the presence of the Lord, because hey, they take him back and we're not there. And to be able to teach him the Lord's with you, and that, this is something that you're going to carry that can one day be your testimony to say, I'm waiting for healing, but until that happens, I'm still going to be dependent on the Lord, and he's faithful.
God, that's crazy. You know, I was talking with Brooks just about leadership, and, everybody wants to be, not everybody wants to be a leader, but people who want to be leaders, people who want to have a legacy, I don't know if we understand what we're asking.
It's a big load.
The weight.
Yes.
To carry and to walk through and to stay faithful, because leadership is about respect.
Yeah.
And people respect you for your life, not your message.
That's good.
Because if your message doesn't line up with your life,
It's not going to work.
it's not going to work. Hypocrisy is the death of leadership.
Yeah.
And you guys have literally walked through that. I'm not saying you're perfect. I'm not saying, any of that, but you've walked through it and been found faithful. I mean, it's just unbelievable.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you just go back to those days of wearing a red T-shirt. And this is why I laugh when our staff talks about problems.
They don't know.
It's like, no. You're hot.
Yeah.
It's hot outside. That's not a problem.
It's going to go away.
That's going to go
gonna
away. Winter's coming. I mean, but to actually walk through some of these things, but it's made y'all who you are.
Absolutely.
And so it's such a catch-22.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I don't want to go through difficult things. Okay, well, you're not going to grow to an amazing level.
Yeah. I mean, I think if you live your life in a way that you're not willing to grow, you're not willing to pursue something, then you stay stagnant. And to me, that's boring.
Sure.
There's no change, there's no growth. And, it's fun for us to be at this season, again, looking back on things, but then to have that same approach to say, well, we can tackle anything. And in every season, we're going to gain something from it. When we told our kids we were moving last summer, we said two things. We're going to watch the Lord be faithful in our suffering. And when we go to leave our next location, we're going to be sad, because we want to live a full life wherever we're at. And for some people, they think it starts and stops. But for us, you just have to keep going.
It's true.
You just have to keep pursuing. You have to find that church and get plugged in. You have to go to those things and be, invite people. Sometimes you have to make the things happen.
Make your church.
You have to make your church, yeah. Or you have to be the one willing to invite. It's kind of that saying, if you need a friend, be a friend. Sometimes you have to be the one to do it. But yeah, I mean, I think it's always encouraging to us to see how the Lord has stretched and pushed us. And obviously for me, like, I'm not in the classroom anymore, but my place of leadership is my kids, and then pushing that legacy and realizing I have 4 years left with one. And, it just, that countdown is like, oh Lord, so it's exciting to think about taking the things that I've learned either from here and through our life experiences to be able to pour that into my kids, so that ultimately, because I want my kids to depend on Jesus. I want them to know Jesus, and I have to live that.
That's right.
I mean, I need that. And so being able to see that in our own lives and to show them we're not perfect. And one of the best pieces of advice we got in all of our moves and everything was, as our kids get older, to share our struggles with them. So that they can see that mom and dad, like, it's hard for us too. And then to show them how we depend on the Lord to get us through, and how we go through seasons of drought. We go through seasons of, man, I don't want to do this. This isn't worth it. But, in pursuing the Lord, it really is worth it.
Yep. And I love, you haven't kept this to yourself. I mean, you lead Bible studies, and each new place that you've gotten in, you haven't said, oh, well, no one invites me or whatever. You kind of jump in and find a place, and then y'all are able to share your story a little bit.
Yeah. And I mean, it's been neat. Camp taught me how to submit to authority. And so it's it's definitely a struggle and a place of tension for me in my life, because I can walk into any Bible study, women's Bible study, and sit there and think I could be teaching this.
It's so true. Oh, it's so true.
Hard.
It is.
And so, but to learn how to submit to that authority and build that relationship with leadership, and then to watch the Lord. He opened a door last month where we're at a mega church, and the pastor's wife said, "Can I take you out to coffee? I heard about you." Which that's a little like, oh gosh. But
what did she hear?
I know, right? I know. But I think it was something I shared in our small group that resonated with someone, and they just said, man, there's something different about this couple, which and that's not, I'm not trying to boast about us, but we've heard that often. And it comes from Brookhill. It comes from what we were taught and poured into us from a very, very early age. And we have that conversation with all of our counselor friends that, are our lifelong friends, that anywhere we go and things that are happening, and, it's different, but our heart is, man, we want to pour that into other people. Other people can be like this too. And so just again, to watch the Lord be faithful, that, he has placed a calling. I think about, you always taught us, Ephesians 4:1, live a life worthy of the calling you've received. I mean, you pounded that into us in whatever season we were of life. We're called to something.
That's right.
And so, obviously called to our kids and teaching them and raising them, but also for me, having a heart for women and, teaching them to just have a deeper relationship with the Lord through biblical teaching and, wanting that for people, because I've seen what the gospel's done for my life. I mean, I can't imagine who I would be, had there not been some major life changes in my life because of the Lord.
Come on. Lindsey, that is amazing.
It's fun.
I love, God, thank you for coming on here.
Yeah, it's fun.
And us just talking and if we can get people to listen to this and just, bottle up what God has done in you guys. I mean, that's it. Build your own Brookhill, life legacy leadership. I mean, this is why we do this. I love highlighting our alumni and what they're doing. And God's doing a lot through you and Brooks. And so
thanks.
I appreciate you being on here.
Yeah, thanks
Fun
for
time.
having me.
Yeah, let's go.